at me. I'm live. I'm on time. Actually, I'm even a minute early. Yes, live on time. Feeling good, y'all. Actually even like a minute early. So it's it's the ADHD. Plus, you know that thing of where you're like, oh, I can like squeeze one more thing in, or I forgot something I gotta like fix. Anyway, so 7 o'clock. I just want to give myself a medal. Also, just as a side note, not related to anything really. One thing I love about having my own YouTube channel. So, okay, I don't know if it's just me, but sometimes when I see people take pictures, I don't know why that's doing that. Sometimes when I see people take pictures for their thumbnail, it looks so extra, and I get it. People do it because it works. That's not my speed. Um, what I like to do actually is I either screenshot it from the video. That's hard though sometimes. And sometimes just before I'll like take some quick ones. But sometimes I pick like the dorkiest one. Actually, I don't usually pick the dorkiest one, but like the second dorkiest one that makes me laugh and I think is funny. And anyway, I don't, I mean, I could have like, I don't know how they do it. I could have, a lot more polished, I guess, photos, but I like looking at the thing and being like, "Oh yeah, that's hilarious." And in fact, I already have the one for this one that I think is funny, so I'm gonna post that. And it's goofy over here, goofy at Abuse Interrupted. um, all right, so tonight, what I wanted to touch base on is how people bypass bypass either your mind or your emotions to manipulate us. And so I think of it on a spectrum. There are the people that bypass your mind and go straight to your emotions. So it's like you're love bombing in order to manipulate you into doing something that they want. Um, and marketers do this, subliminals do this. So if you're going to sleep, you're listening to like maybe affirmations or something subliminally that bypasses your cognitive thinking and sort of is going straight to your like bypassing your reasoning center basically, and planting suggestions. Well, the opposite of this is true. The other side of the spectrum is also true, which is that someone can use logic to make you discount your emotions. So, like your gut feeling, for example, and manipulate you that way. So, to me, I think of it as two ends of a spectrum. On one end, they're using emotions to bypass your logic and reasoning. And on the other hand, they're using logic to bypass your emotions and gut instinct. And so when we want to be integrated, right? Like this is our best way of accessing like our discernment. So our reasoning is engaged, but also our gut instinct and our emotions are engaged. So anytime you're in an argument with somebody, they're trying to like rules lawyer you out of your emotions, or they're trying to emotion you out of your reasoning. Both of those scenarios are gonna usually be manipulative scenarios, right? We want to respect people's emotions, respect their thinking, but also we're not like dictating it at them. So when someone's doing that to us, we know that is not okay, and we should be on high alert. A lot of these things that I've learned very much the hard way. But you don't have to learn this the hard way. Although I suspect it's going to sound very familiar. But sometimes it helps to see how another person articulates what we've dealt with, what we've been through, so that it helps us process and understand like this thing that we went through. But yeah, like the love bombing. Anytime you get, oh, well, don't you love me? If you love me, you do X, Y, Z, right? That's that's making a claim to emotions to get you to bypass your reasoning and your reasons. Like, not cool. All right, let me check my list. There was something else I wanted to talk about. Um, oh, I okay. I'm so proud of me. I came up earlier with a perfect example of how someone can be technically correct and the rules lawyering you, um, but it's in bad faith and it's manipulative. And so the analogy that came to me earlier is restaurant hours. So, for example, a restaurant, let's say it closes at 8 p.m. Now, we all know a restaurant closing at 8 p.m., you don't want to show up at 7:59 and then put in orders and make the kitchen open back up and have to be there like an hour and a half longer just to like, take care of you. Just because it's not technically 8 p.m. does not mean that you aren't being manipulative by insisting that they let you in because technically you don't close until 8, right? So whenever you're dealing with a rules lawyering asshole, they do stuff like that where they're like technically correct, but it undermines the spirit of the law. So they're, you know, just in general, you get a rules lawyering kind of person, like yeet out, unsubscribe, do not deal with that. That's somebody who is more interested in trying to obtain what they want through manipulating the rules than having actual like a meeting of the minds with you, and engaging with you in good faith. Those of us who've worked at restaurants, we would never come in at 7:59 and then act entitled for them to open back up and serve us because, oh, they're technically not closed yet, right? Like, there's a minute left. Technically correct is not always correct. So when you see that's basically the pattern that I'm thinking of. Yeah, that was good. Oh, and the opposite of this, okay. The opposite of the technically correct people is the feelings are facts people. So, how do I put this? You often see this with certain mental health challenges. You see it when people are young. Um, I'm not saying only for sure, but you can, there's usually a pattern of this where because they feel a certain way, therefore the feeling is directing their perspective on the facts. Like we've now swung the pendulum to the opposite side. Our feelings give us good information. If you're sad, for example, then your feelings are letting you know that something happened to you that was maybe traumatizing, that you're having grief around, and maybe even that you need to slow down and sort of get some nurturing and caretaking. So being sad lets you know something important, or being angry lets you know something important. Being happy lets you know something important. So the emotions give us information that is helpful, but you don't want them like driving the car. You don't want them determining reality. It just gives you information to then add to kind of like everything that you're working for. And I'm just like hot takes today. I don't I haven't talked about this in a video. I've been meaning to. When you, mental health. So I'm not never, but rarely do I look at a situation and think there's mutual abuse. That's not something that I generally am aligned with when I'm running an analysis. Usually I'm seeing an abuser and then maybe someone, because they've been in this dynamic, because they're being controlled by the abuser, and because you're not your best self under these circumstances, you may start to respond in non-optimal ways. So some people consider that to be reactive abuse. I don't. The way I conceptualize it is that you might engage in behaviors on the spectrum of abuse, but you're not broadly, quote unquote, the abuser because you're not controlling the dynamic. You are stuck in a dynamic that you can't get out of. That large caveat said, a couple of times I've looked at a situation and been like, oh boy. Okay. So like this lady contacted me and she was explaining how this guy was being abusive, but then she explained how for the prior like year and a half, she was being extremely emotionally abusive. Grappling with a mental health situation. So having a hard time aligning with reality and just sort of being not okay. Like verbal abuse, psychological abuse. Like the stuff she was telling me, I was like, "Oh man, I mean, we're talking stalking, we're talking surveillance, like the whole just the like a checklist, a lot of a checklist." Without the physical aspect though. So like a year or something in, he then becomes physically abusive, which is abuse. And I was just like, I'm sorry, this is above my pay grade. But what I want to tell you is this is the first time that I've legitimately gone, oh, this might be mutual just because of the extreme, extreme abuse that she was engaging in for that length of time. Then he started engaging in extreme abuse. Um, Whenever there's mental health in the mix, that really, a lot of times you can't get someone aligned on reality. The feelings are facts. The feelings are facts might not even stay the same. There might be state specific beliefs. So they believe one thing when they're happy, another thing when they're sad, another thing when they're angry. Um, so if that's us, we really want to do our best to align with reality. And I'm not saying everybody's perfect, but we wanna be oriented towards safety. So no matter what we're thinking and feeling, if we're struggling with a mental health challenge, regardless of what our brain or emotions are telling us, we wanna think like, "Okay, I feel this way, but am I oriented towards safety if I act on the natural conclusion of this?" The answer might be no. And if you're in a position where you're just responding and you're not actually thinking things through because you're in like the gestalt of anger, that's usually a signal that okay, I'm not safe in this moment, and I need to be in a place where oh hey, um, I'm not safe in this moment, and I need to remove myself until I can emotionally regulate, calm down, and then be more in my reasoning self. You know, yeah. So anytime, like I have two parents that are have mental health challenges, significant ones, and so watching this, as a child, the logic, the reasoning either goes out the window or they become like martinets about it, and the extremes are extreme, and it's extremely hard to get through to them to explain reality. That's kind of the nature of like a mental health challenge is that they're not aligned with reality. So first of all, if you're dealing with another person who's got a mental health situation, you can feel pricked in your heart. You can feel concern and you could even want to like help them. But I super recommend distance. It is a liability. Sorry to be paralegally, but you just want to be so careful. Because if they're not aligned on reality in general, then they're not going to be aligned on reality toward you. And so you're going to sit here and think, well, I didn't do XYZ. And it doesn't matter. Like if you're dealing with somebody with schizoaffective disorder or schizophrenia, that often, at least in the United States, co-occurs with like paranoia. And that is a dangerous, dangerous place to be. Yes, 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 yep. So now if we're the ones that we are struggling with a mental health situation, it's our it's our job to recognize we're not being safe and to position ourselves so that we cannot harm people. So that's why, if you are struggling with that and then you're in the moment and you've done something harmful, when you're finished and you look back on it, you go, "Oh no, this was not okay. All right, I need to put in place supports or I need to take action so that this does not occur again." Um, of course, that does take some alignment with reality to recognize. Like the worse it is, the harder it is to recognize that. And what's honestly, just to take it back, the worst thing about like a like dealing with abuse or dealing with a mental health challenge is like you have to be somewhat aligned with reality. You have to be somewhat reasonable to understand there's a problem, because the further you're into it, the more extreme it is, like the more just off of reality an abuser is, for example, you're not going to be able to get through to them, even if you really want to. And so that's why usually when I'm talking with people, I could be talking to an abuser, I could be talking to a victim, I could be talking to an abuser who thinks they're a victim. I've talked to victims who think they're abusers. And so one thing that I think really cuts through everything is to be safety oriented. And so that way you get to a place of safety, and then, like, okay, let's try and figure this out. Versus trying to figure it out, who's the abuser here, who's the victim, um, especially when that might take kind of an unpacking process with the professional. Always love my yeah, I don't know what it is. So many victims of abuse like do not, they don't want to go to therapy, they don't want to go to police, they don't want to, oh, what's the other one? Therapy, police, and oh, domestic violence shelters. Like, when you suggest them, and I didn't either. I didn't wanna do that. All of those things felt very extreme. Um, no, what now? Ooh, no, I didn't see, I saw that there was a thing and I didn't look into that video. So, honestly, I've been, like, on the Cesar Chavez thing where they found out that he was a rapist, and I was like, I'm not surprised because it's the '60s and they didn't even think women were victims of rape back then. So, yeah. Um, I'll look into that though, because that's, yeah. Anyway, so I definitely I wasn't gonna stay on long tonight, but I did want to like touch on those topics. And yeah, it's when we have we want, when we have empathy for people, okay, okay, safety first, safety first. And it seems like the hotlines that never I know, I know, I know. So, okay, so the thing about the hotlines, I've actually worked hotlines. The one I worked, was a suicide, like, crisis, warm line, and first of all, it was such a great resource. A lot of domestic violence hotlines, they try to immediately get you to a resource, and sometimes you just wanna talk to somebody, and so, often, I will recommend that victims of abuse call, like, the suicide hotlines or warm lines, so you don't have someone rushing you off to get to a resource, so you can actually, like, talk to a person. But you do eventually wanna get to a therapist, and what I tell victims of abuse is like, "Okay, it's like hanging with your bestie, where you, like, finally get to talk about you," because many victims of abuse are so oriented toward other people that they aren't necessarily being present themselves or thinking about what they think about things. And so, I mean, obviously, you gotta get the, like, right person, so it might take a little bit of window shopping, but, like, when you get the right person, it is fire. And I felt so dumb. I was like, "Oh, I can't believe I haven't been doing this for, like, 10 years at this point," you know? And then, when they feel like you've gotten to a healthy place, um, they'll, like, say, "Okay, so we're gonna wind this down," and you're like, "Oh, no, but I don't want to." Wait, I just like the privacy if I can afford it. Privacy about, oh, the shelters. Oh, okay, okay, so the thing about the shelters, so important. You don't necessarily have to go into the shelter, but they have a ton of programs. Like, I got a car. Part of how I was, like, trapped in the situation was I didn't have a vehicle. Like, my car broke and I couldn't fix it, and then I was, like, stuck. And then that was a whole thing. And so when I went through the program at the shelter, they were like, "Oh, we have this, like, sister program where you can go through and get a car." And so I went through the program and I got a car, and they had like counselors there that you could talk to. You could go to programs that they had, and they were like an educational program I found really helpful. Although I will say, there was a woman there who talked about being stabbed, and I was like, she does not need to hear my story. Like, I'm just gonna sit here because I've never been concerned about that. Anyway, so there's like a lot. Um, Therapy, I just didn't realize how much I've been holding in just in general because of rural isolation. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And the thing too is a lot of victims of abuse are strong. They're strong. And so you just get to this point where you're so used to not having anyone to depend on. You're always the one that's doing everything. And so sometimes it's hard to think like, "Oh, I can't do this all," or I should get support. Um, let's see. Yeah, mine's not even close to like that sort of drama. I feel stupid. Yeah. Yeah, I feel stupid enough already. The stabbing, I honestly I might even feel embarrassed to like tell people about that. But um anyway, so yeah, I recommend domestic violence shelters, and they have programs often for men, even if they don't have a shelter side for men. So although the Miami-Dade County one in Florida, they have like a men's side. So I've like recommended that to victims, like male victims. So it doesn't, even though the recommendations don't seem like they're for you, I can't recommend it highly enough. If you can just talk to somebody, get in front of like a good therapist, if you can, get in a shelter program and then you might be able to like get some support. Um it was a huge factor in my ability to, get out of the situation, get a job, have a car, be independent and on my own. Like once you have that place where you can stand on, that's huge. Girl, especially if you're, like, rurally isolated. Oh my gosh. I feel terrible for victims of abuse that are in the country because there's, like, nothing out there, so I'm sorry for that. Anyway, yeah, I'm hope you don't mind. I'm gonna end this here. It was good to see you, and, yeah, talk to you next time. Okay.